In the heart of New York City, Shattered Echoes unfolds a tale of friendship, love, and unexpected encounters that challenge perceptions and intertwine destinies. The narrative introduces us to Rose and Michelle, two friends whose bond is as fierce as it is entertaining. Rose, unapologetic and free-spirited, drags Michelle, a meticulous lawyer, into wild adventures that serve as an escape from their everyday lives. Michelle's professional setbacks and personal longings find solace in Rose's company, especially after the abrupt cancellation of her favorite TV show, symbolizing life's unpredictable turns. Interwoven with their story is the mysterious encounter of Dark, a man plagued by vivid dreams that hint at a dark premonition. When his dream becomes reality, saving a stranger from a harrowing attack, Dark questions the nature of these psychic visions. Alongside friends Dontae and Eli, they navigate the aftermath, realizing that fate has brought them together for a purpose. Parallel to these events, Nathaniel and Michelle's blossoming romance adds a touch of warmth and hope. Their relationship, forged amidst adversity, evolves into a profound commitment, demonstrated by a tender moment atop the stairs, where Nathaniel confesses his initial doubts about Michelle's arrival, only to be reminded that love often defies expectations. Meanwhile, Talia, a new character introduced in the midst of chaos, finds herself amidst this circle, sharing a common thread of resilience and seeking understanding in the face of fear. Her lighthearted comment about ice cream masks deeper emotions, resonating with the group and highlighting the unexpected connections that form in life's tumultuous journey. The novel further delves into themes of identity and acceptance, particularly with the revelation of a character's werewolf nature. This disclosure not only tests the boundaries of love and trust, but also forces characters to confront their prejudices and reevaluate their understanding of the world. As the truth unfolds, relationships are strained, and characters are pushed to their limits, questioning what they thought they knew about themselves and each other. Shattered Echoes ultimately explores the intricate dance between destiny and choice, revealing how even in the chaos of New York, lives can converge, and the most profound connections are often forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. It's a story that reminds us that in the midst of darkness and uncertainty, moments of serendipity can illuminate the path towards redemption, love, and self-discovery. Chapter 1. Lacerated by flashing blue and yellow club lights, Rose made her way through the crowd yelling, "I need to get laid," headed for 2 seats that just opened up at the bar. She didn't see the rolled eyes and exasperated look of her friend Michelle, who was attempting to keep up despite the hindrance of severely high heels and uncooperative clubgoers. Michelle watched as Rose stopped in the middle of the room, imprisoned by a fresh beat blaring through the expensive sound system, drunken arms flying up as her hips swayed. Descending upon her, she said, "Be careful. Don't say those things so loud." "Oh, you're always so uptight," Rose snapped, her light brown hair bouncing as she resumed her oh-so-purposeful journey to the bar. Affronted, Michelle grabbed Rose's arm and swung her around. "Coming from a lawyer, I take that very personally. I am not so uptight. I'm just trying to make sure you don't get hurt," she added in a loud whisper. "This is New York City. A woman has to be careful." Rose scoffed loudly and then slurred, "We're smack in the middle of a public place. I could yell 'fuck me' now just like that and no one would do anything about it." With a dramatic swing of her pretty head, she looked around. "See? They just think I'm drunk." Michelle smiled despite herself. "You are drunk." As irritating as Rose was being tonight, Michelle loved the hell out of her. The girl always had a way of making her forget about work, her lack of a partner, and the fact that they'd canceled the Paradise after only 2 seasons. They'd met when one of the companies Michelle was working for with her private social marketing business broke the contract and didn't pay her. Rose had come with high recommendations that said she was a viper in the courts who'd get the money due and then some. When they'd met for their first consultation, the two had hit it off as if they were sisters and sometimes got on each other's nerves in exactly the same way. Best friends ever since, and that was 2 years ago. Oh, and Rose took that company to the fucking cleaners, just like the referral promised. It gave Michelle enough money to be choosier about who she worked with, a luxury she'd never stop being grateful for. In especially rare form tonight, as it was her birthday, Rose reached behind Michelle's head and unleashed the messy bun from its elastic band, tossing it in her face. "There. That's better. Loosen up." Dark chocolate brown locks cascaded onto Michelle's bare shoulders, the spaghetti straps disappearing entirely on her little black dress. "And I am drunk. What's wrong with that?" "It's a celebration," she said with sarcasm. then flipped around and took off, running. Michelle stared after Rose and glanced down to her own loose long hair. Smelled like sweet shampoo, still slightly damp from the shower, and with her cleavage hiked up, thanks to the most insane underwire ever invented. Even without a mirror she knew she must look pretty smokin' hot. So she put her hair back up. Running back to retrieve their forgotten purses from the booth, Michelle wondered, good lord, why are birthdays always so hard? Her elbows stuck out as she fought to tie her hair into place, and she knocked into people along the way, distracted and trying to get to their bags before they got stolen. Excuse me. On seeing the booth still empty, she exclaimed, "Oh, thank God." In a hurry, she climbed onto the red leather cushion on all fours, her mind still on men, not wanting the distraction of them, and on her drunken friend, who was probably surrounded by them this very minute. In her haste, up went the hem of her very tight little black dress. She yelped and straightened up like a shot, tugging the skin-tight fabric to a safer location as she peeked behind her to see if anyone saw. Eyes of the palest green flashed upward and locked on her mortified face. Frozen, kneeling on the leather seat, her bun askew on her head, she stared back at a man who was without a doubt the most handsome she'd ever seen. He had thick, dark, wavy hair, a square jaw and sexy lips parted in surprise. He wore an expensive suit, complete with tie, and his hands rested casually in his slacks pockets. From the darkening look on his features, he'd seen the crotch of her lacy pink panties and hadn't minded at all. Michelle blinked herself back to focus. She glanced around, grabbed the purses from the shadows, and caught sight of her fucked-up hair in the reflection of the mirrored tabletop. Her thunderstruck brown eyes widened and she mumbled, "Great. I look like a spaz," as she pulled down the ridiculous bun and let her hair go free. Climbing out of the booth rather gracefully despite herself, she kept her eyes on the floor, but could not help casting a glance to her left to see if he was watching. He was. They locked in a visual tug-of-war. Until splash. "Damn it. Watch where you're going," Michelle cried. "Sorry." Wiping off the cold, clear, olive-smelling liquid from the girl's red blouse with her hand. "So sorry. I just bought that martini. Stop doing that." "Sorry. I'll get you another one. I'll be right back. Do me a favor and don't." "What the fuck is your problem?" Michelle snapped. Backing down, the woman muttered, "Nothing. Just leave me alone." As she headed for the bar, Michelle stole a glance over to the green-eyed stranger. He was gone. "Shell. Hurry up," Rose yelled. Distracted, Michelle muttered on her way, "I have the worst luck with men." But she couldn't help searching one last time. With a seductive yet somehow slightly pathetic smile on her face, Rose leaned over the glossy black countertop toward the baby-faced pretty boy working behind it. Her breasts threatened to tumble out for all to see, so Michelle gritted her teeth and warned her, "Rosie, watch it, baby. You're about to fall out of that dress." "Nothing wrong with that," the bartender smirked. "Look at that smile," Rose purred to him. "Did I tell you yet that it's my birthday? Wanna be my present?" Michelle rolled her eyes as he reached for a bottle of patron tequila. "Your birthday, huh? Well, then it's time to celebrate." Rose winked at him. "You knew I was drinking patron, huh? You were watching me earlier, weren't you?" He cocked an eyebrow that said he had been staring. Between them, Michelle couldn't take it anymore. The dude was obviously a douchebag and nothing good would come of this. That might have been what Rose wanted now, but in the morning not so much. "Friend to rescue time." Michelle threw out her arm to stop him from pouring. "Don't. She's had enough." He ignored her. "Okay, that's it. I'm sorry, but she won't be drinking that. We're leaving." She shoved Rose's purse at her, feeling slightly bad about the oof her friend made as it knocked the wind out. Pointing to the full glass, he grunted, "I'm not pouring expensive booze down the drain." She ordered it. Michelle shot him a look that meant business. "No, she didn't. You did. And you can clearly see she's drunk. It's illegal to serve her, and you know it. So pour that tequila out or get a call from the city declaring your liquor license removed for negligence." She wasn't a lawyer, but she'd seen Rose act this way enough times to know what to do. Rose glared at her, though. Apparently imitation is the sincerest form or irritation when blocking one's bed buddies. Michelle yanked her off the chair and pulled her toward the exit. "I don't like you. You love me, and you know it." As she thrust her friend into the fresh air of Manhattan's West Village, Michelle set her down by the wall and went to hail a cab. Outside the lounge, club patrons stood in clumps smoking and chatting in private tones, unconcerned with the argument beside them. It was New York after all. People could be stabbing each other and no one would blink. He wanted me. He would have taken you home and never called you again. What wrong with that? Rose grumbled. It's my birthday. With her arm in the air, Michelle admitted only to herself that birthday or no birthday, she too could use a good romp in the proverbial hay to release the tension of the last 5 years. Ever since she'd graduated college, it had been work mixed in with friend time and inconsistent dates with inconsistent men. Men raised by women. Men who were really boys. Men who wanted their mommy. Well, she didn't want to be her lover's mommy. She wanted to be his bitch, his conquest, his slut, his lady and equal in public, but whore and slave in the bedroom. She wanted her clothes ripped off her. And, straightening her spine, Michelle shook off her daydream and focused on the problem at hand. Another time, you wouldn't have remembered any of it anyway. And, hoopsie, she ran to grab slumping Rose before she hit the unforgiving pavement. Resting her against the dark window, she pulled at her friend's short blue dress to keep her decent. Rose closed her eyes and there was sadness to her face that broke Michelle's heart. She smoothed down the shoulder-length light brown hair and held her friend's cheek, saying quietly, "Happy birthday, lovely. It's not as bad as it seems." Michelle sighed and went back to hailing a cab, stepping off the sidewalk this time to show she was serious. The first two drove by taken, but the third stop. The driver, a round-faced man who originated from the Dominican Republic, was nice enough to help her get Rose in the car without having to be asked. Michelle slid in next and before he closed the door she said, "Thank you. It's Saturday." He shrugged, like been there done that every week. "Where are you headed?" "Downtown, please." As they rode, Rose snored and Michelle stared at the passing buildings with a growing sense of disappointment. For what she didn't know, her job was fulfilling in its own way. She loved the creative aspect of getting a great product seen by structuring compelling social media marketing campaigns. She knew how to leash and control the power of the internet, and most of the executives at the major companies hiring her had no clue, so her voice was heard and appreciated. But between all the hours she put into promoting their products and promoting her own name to maintain consistent income, it left little time for play. "Boy, do I need to have fun," she told the closed glass window. "What do you do?" the driver asked her. Surprised, Michelle met his eyes in the dirty rearview mirror. "What? Oh, have my own business." "No, what do you do for fun? You just said that you needed to have fun." "Did I say that aloud?" She glanced away from his kind, inquiring gaze out onto the dark city streets again. He dropped it. After tucking Rose into bed, Michelle locked up and took the elevator to the lobby, wondering why she didn't ask the driver to wait for her. It was hard to get a taxi downtown this late, but when he'd asked her that question she didn't have an answer and it unsettled her. The club wasn't fun save for the 2 brief minutes she'd held the attention of Mr. Gorgeous. Walking out, she glanced around the dimly lit street and crossed her arms, considering waiting for a cab. Calling one wouldn't do any good on a Saturday. Why hadn't she worn a coat tonight? "Because I thought I'd be inside a freaking car, that's why." Sighing, she started walking to her one-bedroom apartment in the East Village, planning to catch the very first cab that passed even if it had someone in it. She'd jump in front of it if she had to. With her clutch bag tucked under her arm and her eyelids blinking way too much, she kept her head down and didn't see the limo sedan parked a block or so up the street. Nervous at being out this late alone, she passed several darkened businesses until she spotted something that turned her stomach. An alley on the left, coming closer by the second. Baby hairs all over her body shot up as scenes from horror films passed before her. "Don't be such a wimp, Michelle. No one's going to be there. You're scaring yourself for nothing." But another voice whispered, "Ignored, call a fucking cab." The shadows grew as she crossed in front of the alley. She looked left even though it was the last thing she wanted to do. No one was there and she relaxed, smiling and chiding herself inwardly for watching those damn films in the first place. To face the fear, she stopped walking and stared into the darkness of the empty alley, taking deep breaths. There was debris on the ground and a graffiti-covered metal trash bin to the left, but no monsters or ghouls. She grinned at her immaturity and called into the darkness, "Boo!" So engrossed in her own personal psyche out, she hadn't seen a hooded man crossing the street, hadn't heard his filthy sneakered feet swiftly making their way over, hadn't seen the look in his eyes as he clocked her and glanced around to make sure she was alone. It wasn't until he was 2 steps from her did she hear him and turn, startled, nearly falling over as her heels caught the seam in the sidewalk. Before she knew what was happening, he shoved her into the shadows. She cried out as she hit the gravelly surface. Her clutch bag fell to the hard ground, its contents spilling out. Stunned and scared, she stared up at her attacker, but couldn't see his eyes for the sunglasses he wore. He was Caucasian and from his skin maybe mid-30s. He sneered and lunged at her. She tried to get away, but he pinned her down and covered her screams with his hand. "Shut up." He pushed her legs open with his. As she fought him, tears rushing from terrified eyes. The stink of body odor perforated her nostrils and she gagged. Hearing his zipper open was the worst sound she'd ever heard in her life. She squeezed her eyes shut. "If I don't see it happening, it won't haunt me for the rest of my life." She felt faint, but kept fighting him through the dizziness that descended upon her. Kicking and hitting. It did no good. She had no training. A strange unearthly sound came from somewhere outside of them, a wild animal's snarl, but greater, because it was paired with a voice so thunderous her body vibrated with its every syllable. "Get off her." The assailant was dragged off her like someone had tied his feet to a truck and put it in high gear. He shouted, and the preternatural voice echoed off the walls of her chest cavity. "Run!" Raving mad with hot tears blurring her vision, Michelle leapt up and ran, kicking off her heels and not looking back. Her bare feet slapped against the cold cement as the most terrifying masculine scream came from the alley. She ran 20 whole blocks as fast as she could past late-night partiers, homeless people and even empty taxicabs, not seeing any of them. When she got to her building on First Avenue, she grabbed onto the marble exterior and gasped for air, immediately hitting all the buttons on the security box. Someone buzzed her in and she shut the glass door behind her, staring out to see if anyone had followed. There was no one, but it didn't make her feel better. She rushed to the staircase and up 3 flights to her apartment, limping from the pain in her legs and the adrenaline that pumped through her shaking fingers. Found the spare key hidden along the top of the doorway. Rushing inside, she locked the deadbolt, grabbed a chair and braced it against the door, knowing she'd left her keys in the alley along with her driver's license that bore her address. It would be a long night until morning came and she could change the locks. She wouldn't feel safe until then. She crumbled to the hardwood floor. And Chapter 2. "That you, Nathaniel?" Dark casually shouted at the sound of the closing front door. The question didn't answer. His mind on what he'd just done, he dropped the keys into the hand-carved wooden bowl on the table just inside the Midtown 2-bedroom flat he shared with Eli. Strolling into the well-decorated living room, he nodded to his roommate and their guest, 2 of his pack members. The balcony door opened and Dontae, the 4th and final member, walked in with a look that said he knew things. But the truth was Dontae was naturally suspicious ever since Catherine. All 3 werewolves stared at their friend, the new arrival, their nostrils flaring at his impossible to ignore stench. "Oh yeah, well there goes lying about where I've been." From where Eli sat on their couch, he demanded, "Why do you smell like murder?" Nathaniel exhaled deeply and walked behind the sleek bar to reach for Lagavulin scotch among the many high-end liquor bottles stored below. He raked strong fingers through his dark hair, popped the top off the bottle with his other hand, and ignored the cork cap rolling toward the end of the bar, where it hovered. Very aware they were waiting for an answer, he poured a hefty amount into a sleek, clear rocks glass. "What can I say? The world is shy one disgusting human being as of tonight." As Dark scratched his beard, he exchanged looks with Eli. They turned to include Dontae, who stood above them, still by the glass balcony door. Nathaniel glanced over. Dante's expression was grave and his returned glance said he was not happy with this information. How could he be? Eli, the wolf closest to Nathaniel, shot up off the couch and approached his roommate. "What did you do?" Green eyes stayed locked on amber liquid as he brought the glass to his lips. "Nothing you wouldn't have. Let me be the judge of that." Eli grabbed the bottle. "Shit. Hand me glass." Nathaniel reached for one, dropping it onto the counter with a thud. Images of her sobbing on the ground with that monster on top of her flashed before him. He grimaced and took another sip to make it go away. Why hadn't I been paying closer attention? I stopped a rape. Oh well, you're right. I would have done that, but... He trailed off, not wanting to be the one to introduce the obvious, the thing they were all worried about, being discovered for what they really were. Darek shuffled his long limbs on the ottoman. Pour me another one, too. Dontae said nothing. They were all dressed in suits as all four had been out that night, agreeing to meet back here for a last nightcap if they didn't find anyone interesting with whom to spend a few hours. That they were all here was a little annoying, for several reasons, but at least Nathaniel didn't have to explain the situation more than once. And explaining he had to do. He knew this. They were civilized. They didn't take human lives unless absolutely necessary, which it rarely ever was. So why did he smell like murder? He walked to the center of the room. There was a kitchen off to the side, hidden by a large white screen they'd installed for design and appealing use of space. Recessed lighting had been added into the entire flat after moving in as well. The bathroom and kitchen sinks were refitted with high-end faucets and drains, as were the 2 showers and bathtubs. Stone tile replaced. Carpets. The only thing that was wanting was a fireplace, which Eli too often reminded Nathaniel he wished they had. But what could be done? They couldn't install a chimney in a 10th floor flat in a 24-floor high-rise downtown, no matter how good they were at their jobs. The 4 naturally nocturnal creatures were architects by day. Together they ran a firm which employed no one but them. It protected them to keep the business small with the strange hours they often kept. Some things in their line of work, meetings with contractors, plumbers, electricians, the city, couldn't all be done at night by any means, since everyone they worked with was human, kept normal hours, might ask questions, spread rumors, but with a small team of only them, they were able to take at least one day a week to sleep all day long, and let their wolves reset in the way that felt best. Sometimes more than one if they felt like slacking off. The pleasures of being your own boss. Darek leaned forward with a gleam in his blue eyes. Go on. Don't get too excited, Darek. Nathaniel frowned. I did what I had to do. Nothing more. Bored with his night's lack of adventure, Darek wasn't easily dissuaded. Come on. Give me some details, Nate. It's not every day we get to take someone out. Dontae growled, causing all heads to turn. Darek, if we let you, you'd kill a man for cutting you off in traffic. Put your leash back on. Eli looked to Nathaniel. What happened? There was a woman. She was walking by herself. Didn't see the guy coming. I hadn't been there, she would have been hurt. Nathaniel downed his glass, thinking if I'd have just looked up a few moments earlier. Eli opened his mouth to speak, but Dontae interrupted with authority. What I don't understand is why you had to kill him. All eyes locked on Nathaniel for an answer. It was the question of the century, wasn't it? He'd been asking himself that ever since he'd literally shredded the guy's arteries. Eli ventured. You've stopped people from doing shitty things before. We all have, Darek overlapped. Dontae finished. But we don't murder them. Green eyes flashed around the room and his fist closed, breaking the glass in his hands. You think I don't know that? That I have to be told like some cub? Blood dripped onto the stone by his feet. Eli rubbed his head. The short shave was often where he found his comfort. All right. Easy, boy. We're just a little surprised and worried about you. About all of us. He threw a clean white bar towel to his buddy. Darek rose to throw the glass away. He held out his hand and Nathaniel gave it to him, impatient at the whole night. Give me the towel for a second. Nathaniel handed it to him and shook his head as Darek wiped up his blood. I got it, buddy. Don't look so bummed. He handed it back so Nathaniel could wrap his nasty wound up. As Darek brought the wet broken glass to the kitchen, Dontae asked, What did you do with the body? Remembering, Nathaniel dropped his head and closed his eyes, blocking out the visual. I left it there. You what? Dontae shouted. Nathaniel shrugged heavy shoulders. What was I supposed to do, get caught carrying a carcass to the water? Even if I was successful, the body would be found eventually and it'd be obvious an animal did it. If an animal killed the guy, what did the animal do then? Try to hide the body in the fucking bay? Smart animal. Dark walked back into the living room, processing out loud. Right? An animal would just leave it there and not give a fuck. Well, I give a fuck. Yeah. Wow. So now what? Let's wait for the news and find out, Eli muttered as he handed Nathaniel a fresh full glass. Because it's sure as hell going to be on there. This is why we don't kill, Dontae said gravely. Nathaniel dropped onto the couch and took a generous gulp, not flinching as the heat hit his throat. Dontae, enough. Are your prints anywhere? He asked. What about cameras? Nathaniel looked at him. No cameras. I checked before I shifted. I'm not an idiot. What about the girl? She's not a girl. She's a woman. Nathaniel corrected him, aware of the immediately exchanged glances around him. He rose up. Look, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. He downed the scotch and laid the glass on the elegant coffee table. As he passed Eli, he received a supportive swat on the shoulder. It was much needed, especially with Dontae looking at him like he'd never been more disappointed in anyone. Dark called to his back. We'll know more tomorrow. Yeah. Walking down the short hallway to his room, he heard Dark say, not quietly, enough. What the hell was that about the woman thing? Dontae agreed. Exactly. But Eli assured them, don't worry. Nathaniel's too smart to let a woman get under his skin. He just likes to play hero. We all do. Nathaniel closed his bedroom door, knowing there was more to it than that. He'd felt something when he'd locked eyes with the brunette who was clearly having a bad night in the club. His wolf had caught sight of the base of her panties peeking out when she'd bent over, and then the full back of them as her dress slid all the way to her waist, but when she'd corrected it and turned around, something hit him. First, she was adorable with her hair all a mess and she unaware of it. Second, those eyes of hers, he felt like he'd looked into them before. Something snapped inside of him like he'd found something, and when she'd held his stare, that feeling only got worse. He'd left to escape it. He'd run, but then found himself telling his driver to go home for the night, to take a cab and leave the sedan with him so that he could secretly follow her home and find out where she lived, unencumbered with having to explain why he was stalking someone. But then she'd taken her drunk friend home instead and had naively walked home. There were no cabs downtown. At that time of night, she should have known it was dangerous and called someone. He'd considered offering her a lift, but that would have looked too obvious. She would have known he'd stalked her, and that couldn't happen. So, distracted, he'd stared down at the keys, trying to will himself to turn the car on and go. He blocked everything out since he was trying to force himself to do something he didn't want to. When he'd looked up, she was gone, with the sounds of a struggle arresting his heightened oral senses. Swearing at himself for not paying attention, he'd rushed to save her, and when he'd gotten his teeth into the guy's neck, the sight of his near flaccid penis hanging out of his dirty jeans incensed him. The idea that this vile human being was about to hurt her, and not only that but take what was his, he couldn't stop himself from killing the son of a bitch. Lying in bed staring at the ceiling, he heard Dark and Dontae go home. A few moments later, a knock came on his door. Come in. Eli walked into the dark room and didn't bother to switch on the lamp. They could both see easily in the dark, and from the look on his face what he was about to say didn't need more light on it. He stood by the wall with the 60-inch flat-screen TV set and asked, "You want to tell me what happened? Now that they're gone?" Nathaniel rose up on his elbows and looked at his best friend. "For a minute I thought you wanted to have a sleepover." Eli grinned. "Who says I don't?" But the smile stopped at his brown eyes now, glowing in the darkness. Here he didn't have to hide his supernatural qualities as they did out in public. "When was the last time you killed someone?" Eli stared at him. "Never have. I thought you knew that." They'd been friends for 11 years, since they were 18, but they'd never talked about this subject. "No," he sat all the way up, his shoulders heavy. "I didn't." "What about you?" Eli asked. "Never mind." Eli nodded, rubbing his closely shaved head as he glanced out the window at the New York skyline before meeting Nathaniel's waiting gaze. "Are you gonna make me torture it out of you?" Nathaniel smiled a little. "I'd like to see that." "No, you wouldn't," smirked Eli. "Seriously. What's up with the woman?" "She's safe now." "That's not what I mean." Nathaniel exhaled. "I know. Look, I fucked up. I won't see her again. Eli's eyebrows rose. Again. Backed into a corner of his own making, Nathaniel confessed everything in the way guys do, with as little detail as possible but covering all the major points. Eli watched and listened, reacting often, as was his way. There was nothing subtle about Eli. You always knew what he was thinking because he wore it on his face. Nathaniel was the opposite, but he wanted to get this off his chest. She sparked something in me, Eli. It's not normal. I couldn't stop myself. That he was going to do what he was going to do. He had to die. What's her name? Eli asked. Nathaniel stared at him. Michelle. Michelle Nero. Eli nodded. Nice name. Well, you know what we're going to do tomorrow. Foreboding hit him as he sensed no good was going to come from that question. Watch the news and see what they come up with. Go see this Michelle Nero. Nathaniel stared, stunned. What? You have a girl, excuse me, a woman hit you this hard to the point where you'd kill a guy who tried to hurt her? You don't let that one go. The dancing eyes of his friend didn't take away the shock. In fact, they added to it. Are you fucking kidding me? I can't go see her. She's dangerous. And why are you coming? Eli headed to the door, chuckling. Because I gotta see this chick, dumbass. I'll set the alarm for noon. He opened the door and turned with a humorously delicate wave of his fingers. Sleep tight, superhero. Then he was gone. Nathaniel got out of bed and walked to the window, staring out at the city. Fuck, he muttered, shaking his... Chapter 3. Michelle woke up on the floor by her front door at 10:15 a.m. First she didn't know why she was there or why her body ached so badly, but then it came flooding back to her. Her familiar ringtone had awoken her. It sounded far away, like in a dream. She stared into her apartment at the red sofa, the IKEA lamp and coffee table, the kitchen farther back that had a sink full of dirty dishes packed so high she could see it from here. She got up to get her purse and remembered she'd left it behind. The ringing stopped and then started again, and she turned and stared at the door, realizing it was coming from the other side. With a throbbing heart, she put her ear to the door and then peeked through the peephole to see if someone was standing outside. Hello, she called through the wood. No response came back. Running into the kitchen, she grabbed her biggest knife and walked to the door, like it might burst open any second. Dragging the chair away from the door, she held the knife at the ready and unlocked the deadbolt. The hallway was empty, but lying on her welcome mat lay her clutch bag. What the hell? She snatched it up and closed the door quickly, locking it behind her. Everything was inside the purse. No money was missing. Her keys were all there, and since it was Sunday, she guessed whoever had left it there hadn't had a chance to make a copy or anything. Confused and not knowing what to think, she checked her phone to see 2 missed calls from Rose. Without listening to the voicemail messages, she called her back. Hey, I'm sorry about last night, Shell. Rose waited and misunderstood the silence. Really, I'm sorry. I know I was more than a little embarrassing. Me and birthdays don't mix. You know that. I can't help it. Thank you for keeping me safe. Hey, you there. Safe. Someone or something had kept Michelle safe last night. Consumed by the memory, she stared at the wall. After a few awkward seconds, Rose begged. Can I make it up to you? Brunch. Mimosas. I have the worst hangover and need the best cure ever. The hair of the dog that bit you, they say. Yeah, sure. Where? Really? Great. For a second there, I thought I'd gone too far and you were never going to speak to me again. Nervous chuckle. How about Lafayette? As in the East Village, so you won't have to go far and... Great. See you in an hour. She hung up, not saying goodbye or waiting for a response as she headed for her bathroom. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror, the mascara-stained cheeks, knotted hair and wrinkled dress with a broken strap, she shook her head with gratitude. It could have been so much worse, she mumbled to her own reflection. You're one lucky chick, Michelle. So many aren't as fortunate. With a shake of her head, she turned the shower on and washed all the evidence away. An hour later, she walked into the restaurant looking and feeling more like herself. She planned to tell her friend everything, but the words kept getting stuck. It seemed so dark a thing to haunt a beautiful morning with, and she didn't want to think about it anymore. Putting it behind her seemed a more positive, proactive approach, so she smiled extra wide and suggested a toast. Instead, Rose raised her glass, waiting. To both of us getting home safely, Michelle said. Rose paused and clinked the champagne flutes together with a shrug. We could toast to that every day. Michelle took a sip. Right. Rose licked the pulp from her top lip and set the glass down on top of her menu. What have you got cooked up this week? Happy for the change of subject, Michelle took another sip and set her glass down as she answered. Well, I've hired some teens to do a Twitter campaign for more designs. That clothing store in the meatpacking district? Yeah, I figured hiring people who already love to tweet would take the onus off me. By delegating, I can spend my time thinking of new ideas. I've got some cooking. Rose shook her head. I hate Twitter. There's a huge community there. I know, but I am much more private. Except when you're screaming to the world that you want to get laid. Michelle teased. Not missing a beat, Rose yelled out to the room of 20 occupied tables. I want to get laid. Michelle covered her face with her hands and Rose leaned forward. But that doesn't go past this room. The internet? That's a whole different ballgame. A guy sitting with his buddy at the table next to them, who couldn't have been more than 20, offered. I'll help you out with that. Rose and Michelle glanced over and he received the once-over twice. Turning back to Michelle, Rose went on as though they weren't interrupted. Can I pay you back for the cab? Michelle's smile vanished and she hurriedly picked up the menu, toppling over her mimosa. A loud crash sounded as wet, orange liquid-covered glass checkered the tile floor. Shit! She jumped up in dismay, lying. I don't know what's wrong with me. A busboy called out as he ran over carrying a mop and dust pan. I've got it. Don't touch it. Embarrassed, she looked from the mess to him, to her friend who was watching her. Rose didn't care about public scenes, but she did care about the law. Let him get it, Michelle. If you cut yourself, you could sue them. That's what he's worried about. Michelle sunk back into her chair. Sorry, she apologized to the busboy as he swept up the floor. The momentary silence of the tables around them went back to normal chatter. I wouldn't sue them for my clumsiness. Who does that? Assholes. Or desperate assholes. You don't have to pay me for the cab. It's okay. Rose nodded and handed her menu over. Here, I already know what I want. What's up with you today? You're normally my role model of poise and grace and you seem… What? I don't know. Shaken. You okay? Michelle buried her face in the distraction of the menu. I'm just hungry, and I'm pretty sure I'm done with booze for the day. When they said their goodbyes an hour later, Rose was still looking at her. Like she wondered what Michelle wasn't telling her. She didn't push it, but Michelle felt badly for the look on her friend's face. For some reason she felt ashamed at having been attacked, even though it wasn't her fault. She was frightened of telling her friend and seeing the sympathy or worse, pity that would surely be there for some time to come, and Rose might blame herself. Saying nothing seemed the best thing to do so that she could move past it and not have to hear the endless "Are you okay? How are you doing?" asked every time they got together. But she was definitely shaken, and she needed a nap, something awful. Eating a tasty meal had helped her feel a little better, but there was a lingering unrest she couldn't shake. At least I didn't spill anything on myself, she mumbled as she glanced down to her white t-shirt and sweater. She tucked her hands into loose boyfriend jeans pockets and walked home, enjoying the calming sensation of one foot placed in front of the other. Just like everything in life, one step at a time would make the next chapter of her existence come sooner, and last night a distant memory. Time, tragedy's greatest friend. What if he'd succeeded? If this is how I feel from just the limited violence I suffered, what if it had been worse? An image of the green-eyed man from the club appeared before her, and she allowed the daydream of him to change the channel of her mind's screen. The way he'd looked at her had been disarming in the best of ways. It made her smile to remember the look on his face when her dress had betrayed what she was wearing underneath. Familiar storefronts, tourists, and locals passed by unnoticed, and soon she found herself pushing the button on the stoplight across from her place, the warm sun shining on her and adding the lift to her spirits. She almost felt normal again. Out of habit, she glanced to the front door of her building and saw him, the man from the club, standing in front of it wearing dark, well-fitting jeans, a black t-shirt and black boots. She stared at him, thinking it the wildest of coincidences. Then he looked over, met her surprised eyes, and offered a tilt of his head in greeting. There was no smile on his face, but the patience. There indicated he seemed to be waiting for her. But that's impossible. She walked into traffic and his widening eyes and hand flying into the air made her look at what she was doing. She scrambled back onto the sidewalk and glanced away embarrassed, then found her gaze drifting back to meet his. Michelle tried to look casual when she felt anything but. What is he doing here? She bit her lip and glanced around, then back to him. He wasn't alone. She realized. A good-looking man with shaved short hair and mischief in his eyes stepped forward and said something in his ear. His friend wore jeans and a blue t-shirt with yellow writing that read, "Deal with it." When other pedestrians walked past her, she realized she'd missed the lights change, joining them as though nothing ridiculously peculiar was happening. She kept pace with the crowd but could not take her eyes off him. She smoothed her hair self-consciously and then realized she was being silly. Hold your head high, girl. That's how to do it. Arriving in front of him, she glanced to her door and back to him. What are you doing here? She blurted, sounding not at all collected. Looking adorable, he blinked and stammered. His friend gave a lopsided grin and thrust out his hand. I'm Eli. It's nice to meet you. This is Nathaniel. Green eyes flashed as he interrupted to introduce himself. He knocked his friend to the side, holding out his own hand to say again, I'm Nathaniel. Eli laughed and was ignored. Michelle. She shook his hand. Her eyelashes dropped as she looked at the size of his hand holding her much smaller one. She loved the way their skin looked touching and how he felt. He was so warm. Do you have a fever? She asked, meeting his eyes. Not that she cared if he did. He could have Ebola and she'd still want to touch him. A light danced in his eyes and he shook his head, still holding her there. He said huskily, I run hot. Eli snorted and Michelle looked at him like she'd forgotten he was there. He dropped the smile. Nathaniel asked with his light green eyes locked on Michelle. Eli, don't you have to be somewhere? Yeah, totally. Have to be somewhere. Someplace. Right now. Nice meeting you. He walked off, glancing over his shoulder with a final wave neither of them saw. Walk with me. Michelle nodded as he laced his fingers with hers and led her back in the direction she'd come. They walked for a whole block in silence, waiting at the same stoplight she'd just crossed at, both of their minds occupied as they stared forward. The silence was charged but comfortable, and she wondered at why being with him felt so perfectly natural. She glanced over to his handsome profile. Do I know him from somewhere and just can't remember? No, I would definitely have remembered him. But then he raised his arm to hail a cab and one pulled over immediately. Her heart raced as she became conscious of the fact that she did not know him. Whatever this was, it made no sense and he was not a friend. She had no idea how he'd come to be there, how he'd found her, and the realization pulled her hand away with violent force. Hold on a second. I'm not getting into a cab with you. A deep crease pierced his brow as he searched her face. I was taking you to Central Park for a walk where we could get to know each other. It's a beautiful day and I thought. He stopped cold at her expression. Look, I see you for the first time last night and today you're outside my apartment like you're waiting for me or something. Seemed like you were. I was waiting for you. Her manicured hand flew up as a boundary between them. How did you know where I live? Did you follow me last night? Struggling, she muttered. No, you couldn't have followed me because and stopped before because you're not that fucking rapist. He was smaller than you and sunglasses or no did not have your face. Do you know the bartenders from last night and they gave you my card info? How do you know where I live? Who are you? He frowned and she could see he didn't know how to answer the question. I obviously didn't think this through. I didn't mean to scare you. He trailed off, lost in thought. He waved the waiting cabbie off and turned to frown at her again. She waited for him to say more, but he just stared at her and if she weren't careful, she'd forget under that gaze to protect herself from him. And any man who couldn't tell her how he'd found where she slept at night. I don't know what to say. I don't have any answers I can give you and I know that sounds strange, but you could just tell me the truth. He glanced to the sidewalk and then to his left, tortured. I can't, he whispered. Stunned, Michelle mumbled, great, and headed home. Walking backwards, she called to him, until you can tell me the truth, don't bother talking to me. Don't do this. She spun around and left him standing there. Before getting home, she changed course and found a key shop open on the weekends where she begged the guy to change her lock. That Chapter 4. Nathaniel watched her yelling at him. Of course she was scared. Why hadn't he thought of that before showing up like this? But he couldn't tell her the truth. She had him in a bad spot and she didn't even know it. She'd looked at him like he was the problem, like she was scared of him. What could he tell her? I'm the one who saved you? That guy will never bother you again, or anyone else. I made sure of that. I know where you live because I brought your things back to you. That bag in your hands, I know what's in it. I studied everything in the purple wallet you've stuffed too many receipts into for it to close. I even know you forgot to take your pill yesterday. When she left, didn't turn around or look back, he walked to the nearest building and leaned against it, watching her, oblivious to the many, many New Yorkers walking past him enjoying the bright Indian summer day. He pulled out his phone and called Eli. I don't know what's wrong with me. You scare her off or something? Why are you calling me? Yeah, she wanted to know how I knew where to find her. Eli exhaled like a tire letting out air. Right. We should have thought of that. I'm sorry, but with the ass you get, it never occurred to me she'd ever question anything. She walked out of his sight as Nathaniel said, yeah, but Michelle was attacked last night, remember? Silence then. Shit. How do I make it right? I don't know, man, but I've got a woman lying naked in front of me, so can we talk about this later? Nathaniel chuckled and hung up. He absently tapped his phone against his thigh. As he thought about the problem, Eli was with someone already, had to be a regular hookup he had in the East Village. Nathaniel had a couple of those, but now they seemed ridiculous. Michelle's hand in his, he'd felt like he wanted to use it to pull her toward him and crush her in a tight embrace. He wanted to spend time with her, listen to her voice, watch her expression change. As long as it didn't change into fear of him. But with what I am, isn't that inevitable if I let her in anyway? No matter how strongly I feel about this human woman, it can't go far. Cannot allow myself to become attached. I will never be able to tell her what I am without that terror transforming her beautiful brown eyes, with me the cause. Knots formed in his stomach and his chest ached with loneliness. He pushed off the wall, walking slowly into the traffic of human bodies, blending in with the pedestrians of all ages, races, and nationalities as though he were just like them. He buzzed the brownstone Dark lived in, expecting to find him absent, lost to a movie theater, his packmate's greatest passion. Dark loved to travel into worlds he would never otherwise know by way of motion pictures. But today, Nathaniel found himself lucky as a sleepy voice burst from the speaker. Pizza guy. No, it's me. The door unlocked with a loud alarm and Nathaniel entered quickly, taking the single flight of stairs to the second floor. The door was open and standing in the doorway was his 6 feet 3 inches friend wearing checkered flannel blue and white sweatpants, bare feet and chest. His red curly hair was everywhere and he jerked his head with a flat, "Hey, were you sleeping?" "Yeah, it's Sunday. Where do I have to go?" Upon entering the apartment, Nathaniel glanced around the usual mess of clutter layering every flat surface including sections of the hardwood floors. "You're a slob. My maid quit," Dark lied with amused sarcasm. Nathaniel pushed over a stack of earmarked Fortune and Money magazines to make room to sit. The comfortable couch cushion gave slightly under his weight and he sunk into it, leaned back and closed his eyes. Dark threw a questioning glance behind him as he headed to the kitchen. "What's up? Feeling guilty? Don't. You should be proud. Forget about what Dontae says." "Oh, I've been watching the news." He threw beans into a coffee grinder, turned it on and talked over the obnoxious sound. "Nothing yet. But it's Sunday, so we'll see if it hits the nightly news or maybe tomorrow. Don't look so glum, man. Rapists should die a horrible death. And I won't apologize for saying that." Nathaniel listened to the freshly ground coffee poured into the French press. If focused, he could hear almost every flake fall. They all could. But you tune that stuff out most of the time. You have to. But on a day like today, where he needed something to ground himself, sounds like that were helpful to keep him not thinking about her. It wasn't doing the trick. He exhaled and called over, "I don't feel bad about what I did. Not that. Anyway." Dark filled a pot from the water faucet. "What then?" He put the pot on the stove, turned on the gas and padded back to the couch, his head to the side. Is it the woman? Surprised, Nathaniel glanced up. Dark chuckled and crossed his arms over his sinewy bare chest. It's always a dame. Dame? You've been watching Casablanca again. Dark shook his head. Double indemnity. Whatever. It's not whatever, Nate. It's Barbara fucking Stanwyck. Now if she was still alive, he whistled. Remember Judy? Nathaniel threw an arm over the back of the couch. The blonde with small tits. Staring into the memory, Dark nodded with a distant smile. Yeah, she was my modern-day Barb Stanwyck. Such a bitch, that one. I miss her. What happened to her again? Married. When you were seeing her? Yep. Ah. Dark walked back to the kitchen. You want some coffee? I'm assuming you do. So the woman last night is she who's got that weight on your soul? You know what I'd do. What? I'd go find her. Not sure he wanted to reveal that he already had, Nathaniel asked. How would I do that? Her scent. Duh. Oh, that. The fresh shampoo mixed with her own personal aroma that he couldn't get out of his nose. And then the sweet scent of arousal he'd gotten a whiff of when they were walking hand in hand. God help me. It's a big city. That's not so easy. A knock at the door swung both of their heads in that direction as a muffled voice called through. Let me in. Dontae. How'd he get in the building? Dark mumbled, impressed. Nathaniel opened the door, and in walked Dontae with a look that sized up the messy room with distaste. He turned on his packmate. Eli tells me you've contacted the woman you saved. Nathaniel cast a guilty look to Dark and shrugged at the drop jaw waiting for him in the kitchen. Dark shook his head with disapproval, grabbing a third coffee cup and pouring. Eli has a big trap. Dontae ignored the casual tone. What do you think you're doing? Nathaniel paused. I don't know. Dontae held his stare. From what I hear, she's nothing special. Fire burst through Nathaniel's preternatural veins. He lunged at Dontae. His punch landed because his attack was unexpected. The second one was for him. Nathaniel reeled back as the powerful hit knocked him against a wall. Running at Dontae, he snarled, but Dark flashed between them with unhindered speed, holding them back with his long arms stretched wide, muscles taut. Enough. Dontae, we know what this is about. Dontae glared at the tall wolf from under blonde, furrowed eyebrows. Fuck you. Panting and eager to fight, Nathaniel glared at Dontae. Move out of the way. Dark. I don't want to hurt you. Calm your wolf, Nate. Dark's eyes flashed. Calm down. Nathaniel snarled. Eli didn't say that about her. You're lying just to piss me off. Dontae shook out his shoulders and his leather jacket shone in the sunlight. Streaming through the window, a grimace appeared and he stepped away. He didn't argue, so Nathaniel knew he'd hit the truth. Satisfied the worst was over, Dark dropped his arms to his sides. I wish one of you had been the pizza guy instead of this. His joke hovered in thick air. With hazel eyes flickering, Dontae carefully chose his words. We came to this city to have lives amid culture and diversity, to see the theater build things, expand ourselves. And you want to tear it all down. I want to do no such thing. Nathaniel stepped forward with fury. I was the first one who said yes when you wanted to leave Maine for here. What I did last night has no reflection on that. What was I supposed to do? Let him rape her? Would that have made you happy? Dontae's jaw tightened. Of course not, he grunted. You stopped that robbery a month ago when that old lady was tied up in her house. How is this any different? I didn't finish the job. The room went silent. Yeah, well, I did. Nathaniel flipped around and made for the door. Nate, come back, Dark called after him. Fuck him. Nathaniel slammed the door. As he strode to the stairs, he paused. Inside, with a voice so low only a werewolf could hear, Dark confessed. You're still hung up on Catherine, that's your problem. Not every woman cheats and lies, Dontae. When are you going to make room for that? There was only silence. Nathaniel headed down the stairs, realizing they were probably listening to his exit. Or at least Dontae would be. He was no fool. He'd been one for Catherine, and Dark was right. He wouldn't let it go. Now, he was on high alert for anyone doing anything they couldn't say aloud, and with pride. Nathaniel didn't have to explain himself for wanting to see Michelle today. Last night's actions were his pack's business, but he didn't see how seeing her had anything to do with Dontae. The mere implied power he tried to exert over Nathaniel was offensive and out of line. They were their own wolves equals, a fact that all four understood. Fuck Dontae. Chapter 5. By Wednesday, Michelle was kicking herself for not getting his last name. Sure, she didn't want to get into a cab with a stranger no matter how hot he was, but she could have suggested instead that they go get a coffee and chat. Or something. At the same time, his being unable or unwilling to explain his appearance made her angry all over again. Back and forth went her emotions over the passing days. As she sat outside, more designs waiting for her client to come out and join her, she typed away on her laptop on the bench, muttering more than once, "I'm losing my mind. Sorry that took so long." Michelle looked up to find 30-something Laura Moore smiling, her red hair all wild, wavy and fabulous. Her outfit was to die for, one of her own creations. She had a funky hipness to her clothing style that didn't lack elegance. It was what a hipster would wear when they grew up a little and decided to wash their hair. Closing her laptop, Michelle rose up to give a hug. "You look so cool." "Me? Look at you." Laura motioned to Michelle's burgundy wrap dress and brown boots. "I love this." Laughing and pleased, Michelle admitted, "I feel like I have to step it up a notch when I come to meet with you in person." Laura waved her away like a friend would, and cocked a red eyebrow. "Want to get a drink and talk about what you've got planned? Carrie can watch over the place just fine." She leaned into the shop and called out, "Carrie, I'll be back in an hour or so. Make sure it doesn't burn down." "You got it," her associate shouted back. Laura winked. "Fun. Let's go." They walked to a local restaurant that had a full bar, and while Michelle wouldn't normally have a drink during work hours, this was her client and in a way her boss, so best job ever. As the bartender leaned in, she was pleased to hear Laura inquire as to whether they carried Trefethen Chardonnay, one of Michelle's delicious favorites. "We have that by the glass." "Two, please." Laura turned on her bar stool and crossed her legs. "So what have you got for me?" The women talked about marketing for the boutique at first, but as they were halfway into their first glass, they were laughing so much that business was soon forgotten. "Yes, you should have seen his face." Laura mimicked her ex-husband's reaction, lowering her voice. "Do you know how many clothing stores there are in New York? You might as well throw money into the Hudson." Michelle laughed. "Once I was dating a guy who told me that because I was a woman, corporations wouldn't take me seriously. There was no way I'd get anywhere big with my business. Can you believe that? In this day and age." "I mean, he's right that sexism is still alive and well, but as if that ever stopped us." Laura rolled her eyes. "Don't they know we women have been fighting for everything we've gotten since the dawn of time? Look at Eve. She wasn't going to just sit in that garden looking pretty. She made a deal with the devil to get what she wanted." Michelle cracked up, shaking her head. "I guess you're right. Well, I knew when he told me that he would never take me seriously and didn't know who he was married to. You have to find someone who helps you keep your sparkle, and that man wasn't him." They clinked glasses in a good riddance toast. "I can't believe you were already married." "I haven't found the guy yet." "Well, apparently neither have I." Laura glanced over as a couple of men sat down on bar stools to their right. They returned her look, but she wasn't impressed and gave all her charismatic attention back to Michelle. "Is there anyone in your life?" "I met someone last weekend, but it's not going to go anywhere. He was a little strange." "Strange good or strange bad?" "I'm not sure yet. And now I'll never know. I don't even know his last name." A rueful smile flashed on lips that had lost their lipstick from all her nibbling. "Should we get some food? I had lunch, but I need a snack." Laura leaned toward the bartender, catching his eye. "Could you give us a couple menus, please?" He reached beside the cash register where plastic folded menus lay waiting. He brought them to her. He asked, "Another round?" Laura and Michelle exchanged mischievous looks and both nodded at the same time. While he got them, Laura shared more of herself easily in a way that Michelle found very refreshing. She was really growing to like this woman and already considered if she and Rose would get along, or if they'd be separate. Friendships. Mixing people together was like making a good soup, and both women had enough fire to cause a potential explosion. "I married Matthew early, and he wasn't a bad man, but he just had too many rules set for himself. Those included having a wife who stayed a couple steps behind him. That wasn't me, but it took me a little while to realize that." You always knew what you wanted, didn't you? That you were going to design. Fashion. A nostalgic smile lit Laura's face and she shook her head. No. First I thought I might be a housewife. Matthew made good money, but when I thought of having kids with him, it didn't feel right. And I had this inspiration eating at me that I couldn't ignore. They thanked the bartender as 2 new glasses replaced their fingerprinted empty ones. Michelle waited for him to leave before she asked. He was competitive with you then? Is that why he didn't like the idea of you owning a shop? At first he thought I couldn't do it, but then when I got the loan found manufacturers I could afford to have create the designs, found a graphic designer who created my logo, all the beginning foundation pieces, etc., and it was moving forward. That's when his true colors came out. He became irritable, snapped at me all the time. He stopped having sex with me. Her eyes went back to the past. Except this one time. It was so angry and raw. I could feel how mad he was that I wasn't who he'd wanted me to be, which, between you and me, was the hottest sex we'd had in the 3 years since he'd put the ring on. Her eyes clouded as she looked at the empty space on her finger. You know, when you get married you think it will be forever. I guess sometimes you can't predict the future. No, but you can still be hopeful and give it your best shot. Michelle watched as her client nodded, picked up the menu and began to read. It was clear Laura's mind wasn't on the printed words before her. She wanted the distraction as the subject had gotten a little painful. Michelle gently offered. You loved him. Laura glanced up from far away. What? Yes, at first. But it's more the loss of a dream. That's the worst thing about divorce. I'm sorry. It's okay, Laura said with a wave. She perked up with a wicked smile. I just want to meet a man who can go toe-to-toe with me. I'm telling you that. Angry sex? I liked it. She picked out her red hair, making it wilder with her fingers. I think I need French fries. Michelle chuckled and realized it was the only sound to be heard besides the quiet background music. Everyone around them was locked on the TV screen. She looked at it, curious to see what had the whole room wrapped. To her horror, there was a reporter standing outside the alley she'd been attacked in. Can you turn it up? The bartender glanced over to her and nodded, grabbed the remote. The reporter grew louder by the second. They still haven't found the animal that killed Jean Carroll Williams here a little past 3:30 a.m. last Saturday night. As we've told you, police say the body was torn to shreds, but now we hear that the zoo is denying any animals have escaped, assuring us they are on full lockdown. What was it that killed Jean Carroll Williams that night, and are we safe? Laura's voice came through the fog. So scary. Like someone had just packed her gut with ice. Michelle stared at the screen. Oh my God, she whispered. Laura glanced over. Haven't you seen this? They've been talking about it for days. Numb, Michelle shook her head, admitting quietly, I don't watch the news. Laying down the menu and picking up her fresh glass, Laura shrugged one shoulder. Smart. It's always bad anyway. But can you believe it? Think the zoo is lying. I think they caught the beast and don't want to draw bad press. You're in marketing, what do you think? Would it be good to tell or better to keep it secret? Keep it secret, she mumbled, her mind on the attack. Blinking to her menu, she did what Laura just had hit her feelings by focusing on the mundane problem of whether to order sliders or buffalo wings. Your phone's ringing. Go ahead and grab it. I have to use the ladies' room. Michelle looked from Laura walking away to her phone silently lighting up on the bar top. It was a phone number she wasn't familiar with. Sliding to answer, she heard her voice still shaken as she said, Michelle Nero. Ms. Nero? We'd like to interview you this Friday. Are you available? She sat up straighter, her eyes on the TV screen. A commercial was playing, and the sound was back down, but Michelle could only see that alley. That was no animal. Animals don't talk. Sure. Who is this? My name is Darek. I'm with DDN Incorporated, an architecture firm here in Manhattan. His calm, deep voice lifted the fog. We hear you're good at getting new business for your clients and we want to meet you. If you're free. On Friday. Tomorrow we'll be out of the office. Yes, I am free Friday, and I'm glad for the day to prepare so I can present you with some ideas of how to expand your social presence. Do you have a Facebook page? He chuckled, then cleared his throat. No, we have none of those things. That's why we need to meet you. How's 1 o'clock? Fine. You have my phone number, so I'm assuming you have my email as well. That you got it off my website. He paused. Yes. I have it in front of me. Fantastic. Will you please send me over whatever information you're currently using for your brand and the address I'm to go to? Oh, and perhaps send a few photographs or links to buildings you've designed so I can get an idea of your vision and how best to present that to the world. From his tone, she'd impressed him already. I can do that. Wonderful. I'll see you then. He said goodbye and they hung up. Michelle ordered the sliders and 2 orders of French fries. Her mood was lifted, and when Laura returned she saw it. Good news, she said on a wide smile. Someone referred me to an architecture firm. I've never worked with one of those. Should be a challenge, though it won't be half as fun as pushing amazing clothing. Laura laughed. Flatterer. I ordered for us. Oh good, I'm starving. She lifted her glass and held it toward Michelle. To success. To new friends, Michelle added. I'll drink to that. They clinked their glasses. Chapter 6. Dark hung up and looked at his 2 packmates. Eli leaned against the office wall. She's coming. Nodding, Dark glanced over as Dontae interrupted. I can't wait. Eli was tired of Dontae's attitude. It didn't matter that he understood it. They were under enough stress as it was, and if everyone could just relax a little, he'd be glad of it. It didn't look like that was going to happen. Dark set his phone on his desk. She sounds very intelligent and good at her job. Nice too. She's the one human being who could expose us. Dontae nearly shouted. And if you think you can trust a woman, then I don't know who you are. Exasperated, Eli crossed his arms, his suit bunching up a little from its tightness. She hasn't come forward yet to the police, and from what Nathaniel said, she didn't see him in his shift. He said she didn't even look. And you think we can trust Dontae? The 2 other wolves shouted in unison, over it once and for all. Dark inhaled deeply. You know we can trust Nathaniel. No way, and I mean in no way would he ever put himself or any of us in danger with that kind of lie. He says she didn't see his wolf, she didn't see it. He put us in danger by cutting him off, Eli growled. I swear to God, your trust issues are enough to make me want to find Catherine and gut her myself for changing you into this. Dontae grimaced at the harsh point hitting home. I just want to make sure she won't tell anyone. Hazel eyes dropped to the floor, and for once he looked vulnerable. Eli pushed off the wall and smoothed down his jacket to calm himself. You'll be able to determine what kind of a woman she is on Friday. Now tomorrow I'm sleeping in until at least 8 at night. I suggest you come join me so I can hold you and make it all better. Dontae grumbled and left the room. Dark and Eli waited until they heard the door to Dontae's office close. Then Eli looked at his bearded friend and said at a lower volume, between you and me, I'm not having her here to see if she can be trusted. I just want to get Nathaniel talking again. He hasn't said a word since Sunday. He's got it bad. He hasn't come in today either. What's he doing? Who knows? Sitting in the chair opposite Dark's desk, Eli added with a tired spirit. You and I are the only sane ones around here. Let's do something. Let's promise to always stay single. Anything else is too messy. Dark stretched his arm across the desk. They clasped hands and said together, deal. Looking to the door with his mind full, Dark leaned back and sighed. An animal escaped from the zoo. Can you believe it? Eli rubbed his head. We're lucky so far. They found fur on the body, so yeah. It's a good thing the police don't know werewolves exist, or they'd be checking that evidence more closely. You'd think after all these centuries, human beings would have caught on by now. Eli nodded, thinking about it. People like to shove their heads in the sand over things they don't understand, or kill it if they're forced to look. Dark frowned. Do you sometimes wish they knew? Not just the cops. Everybody. Eli played with a button on his suit jacket. Yeah, I've thought about it. It'd be nice to not have to hide. But can you imagine what society would do if they realized their horror myths were sitting at the table next to them at Dominic's? A sardonic smile spread from Dark. If they accepted us and knew what we were, and didn't try to dissect us to see how to heal faster and advance science, it'd make life a very different thing. Like what Nathaniel's going through. He just wants to go and tell her what he is and what he did. Eli stared at Dark, surprised he'd figured it out so clearly. How do you know That. Dark shrugged. It's what I would want if I met someone I'd kill for. I'd want her to see me. Eli snickered. You've been watching Avatar again. Guilty as charged, Dark mumbled. Well, if the world knew, it would make dating a whole lot easier. I'm just saying. Or harder. Depends. Most women would be scared to death. Eli cocked his head to the side, his dimple flashing. But we're staying single, so what do you care about women and dating? Dark restrained a grin. Right. I forgot about that. Smacking his hands on the arms of his chair, Eli rose up and shook his head. Dramatically. Fucking women. What they do to us. If they only knew. At the closed door, Eli turned around, his smile dropping. Nathaniel's not going to like this if it doesn't work out. Dark leaned forward with his hands clasped together, elbows on the desk. He'll never know. But this will give us a chance to check her out and see what to do next. If he wants her, we need to meet her and make sure he's got our best interests at heart. We're a pack of 4, not 1. Now you sound like him. Eli pointed at the door, and both of them knew he was talking about Dontae. Nathaniel's our brother. You'll see. After Eli left the room, Dark yelled. Avatar's a great film. Softy, came back the laughing retort. Jerk, Dark muttered. I heard that. No shit, he yelled. Muffled laughter as Eli went into his own office and shut the door.